"No, don't spread my legs like that," the Apache girl said, the lone rancher. The wind had a way of telling the truth out here. It swept across the plains without mercy, lifting dust from the earth and carrying it for miles, as if the land itself was restless. Elias Carter felt it the moment he stepped down from his horse. This was supposed to be the beginning of everything, a new farm, a new life, land he had spent every last dollar to claim. The deed said the property was empty. The land said otherwise. Elias adjusted his hat and walked forward, boots crunching against dry soil. The old structures near the center of the property hadn't been mentioned in any survey maps. A broken fence, weathered posts, and then something worse. A wagon wheel fixed upright like a cruel monument. At first he thought it was abandoned equipment left behind by settlers who had failed, but as he moved closer, his chest tightened. Someone was there, a young woman, bound to the wheel with rope that had cut deep into her wrists and ankles. Dust clung to her skin. Her breathing was shallow but steady. She was alive. Barely. Elias stopped several feet away. His hand twitched toward the knife on his belt, then stilled. The West had taught him one thing above all others: move too fast and you invite death. The woman lifted her head, her eyes locked onto his. They were not pleading. They were warning him. "Don't," she said, her voice raw but clear. "If you touch the ropes wrong, it will tear more." Elias swallowed. This was no criminal justice, no lawful punishment. This was cruelty disguised as authority. He had seen it before in towns that pretended to be civilized. "I won't hurt you," he said slowly. "I promise." She laughed once, short, bitter. "Promises don't live long out here." The wind rose again, whipping her hair across her face. Elias could see the marks now, where rope had burned into skin, where strength had been tested until it failed. Whoever had done this expected the sun to finish the job. Elias looked around. No riders, no dust clouds on the horizon, just open land and silence. Silence that demanded a choice. He could ride away, tell himself it wasn't his fight, tell himself the West was full of things a man couldn't fix. Plenty of men had survived by doing exactly that. But then there was the other truth, the one that stayed with you. If he left her here, this land would never be his. Not really. "My name's Elias," he said. "I bought this land last week." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Then they chose it well," she said. "They wanted to make a message." "A message for who?" "For anyone who thinks this place belongs to them." Elias exhaled slowly. The realization settled like a stone in his chest. This wasn't just about her, it was about control, fear, the kind that spread faster than fire. He stepped closer, careful, deliberate. He knelt, examining the knots. "I'll cut the rope one strand at a time," he said. "You tell me when to stop." She hesitated. Then she nodded. In that moment, before the knife ever touched the rope, Elias crossed a line he could never uncross. The kind the land remembers, the kind that turns ownership into responsibility. The wind fell quiet, and the plains waited to see what kind of man he would be. The knife felt heavier in Elias' hand than it ever had before. He slid the blade beneath the first strand of rope, careful not to touch skin. The woman's breath caught as the tension shifted. Elias froze instantly. "Too much?" he asked. She nodded once, slow, the ropes bitten deep. Elias adjusted his grip and worked with patience, slicing fibers one by one instead of cutting through all at once. Sweat ran down his back despite the cool wind. This wasn't like cutting fence rope or tack. Every movement carried consequence. One mistake could turn pain into something far worse. As the first loop loosened, the woman gasped, not in relief, but in effort. Her body had been held in place for too long. Blood returned where it had been denuded, sharp and unforgiving. Elias steadied her ankle with one hand. "Tell me if you need me to stop." "I won't," she said through clenched teeth. "Just don't rush." The words stayed with him. Don't rush. Out here, rushing was how men died, or how they learned to live with what they'd done. When the final knot gave way, Elias didn't let her fall. He supported her weight slowly, easing her down to the ground. Her legs trembled, barely holding. She leaned against him for just a moment, long enough to keep from collapsing, but then she pulled away, pride intact even in pain. "Thank you," she said quietly. Elias nodded. He didn't trust himself to speak yet. He helped her to his horse, lifting her carefully into the saddle. She winced, but didn't cry out. The strength it took not to made Elias look away. Some kinds of pain deserved privacy. The ride back to the farmhouse was slow. Elias walked beside the horse, one hand on the reins, the other ready if she slipped. The land stretched endlessly around them, indifferent to what had just happened. That indifference felt heavier than judgment. Inside the small cabin, Elias laid a blanket near the stove and helped her down. She sat stiffly, breathing shallow, eyes tracking every movement he made. "You don't have to stay," she said. "If they come back, they won't ask questions." "I know," Elias replied. "That's why I am staying." He fetched water, clean cloth, and salve from a wooden box. When he returned, he stopped a few steps away and waited. She studied him, then nodded once, permission. Elias worked carefully, cleaning the rope burns and cuts. His hands were steady, but his thoughts were not. Whoever had done this hadn't just meant to hurt her, they'd meant to be seen, to mark the land with fear. "What's your name?" he asked. "Yana," she said, "and they tied me there so others would understand." "Understand what?" "That this land answers to them." Elias wrapped the final bandage and leaned back. Outside, the sun dipped lower, painting the plains gold and red, beautiful, deceptive. "Not anymore," he said. Yana met his eyes. For the first time, something softened there, not trust, not yet, but recognition. That night, as the wind rattled the cabin walls, Elias didn't sleep. He sat at the table, rifle within reach, listening to the land. Mercy had a weight, and he was beginning to feel just how heavy it could be. Elias had not slept. The night passed in fragments, wind against the walls, the low crack of the stove, the steady rhythm of Iana's breathing from the other side of the room. Every sound outside the cabin pulled his attention sharp and ready. He knew this land too well to believe mercy went unnoticed. Just before dawn, the horse stirred. Elias rose slowly and stepped to the window. The sky was pale, the sun still hidden beyond the horizon. That was when he saw them, 3 riders moving along the fence line, far enough to watch, close enough to be seen. They weren't lost. They were waiting. Elias stepped outside, rifle resting against his shoulder, not raised, not lowered. The cold air bit at his skin as the riders came to a stop. Dust drifted around their horses, legs like smoke. "Well now," one of them called out, voice carrying easily across the open land. "Looks like the farm ain't as empty as it was yesterday." Elias said nothing. The man smiled thinly. "You found something that didn't belong to you." Behind Elias, the cabin door creaked. Gianna stood in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, pale but standing. The men noticed her instantly. Their smiles widened. "She's ours," another rider said. "Always was." "No," Elias answered calmly. "She's a person, and she's staying until she chooses otherwise." The wind shifted. One rider spat into the dirt. "You're new," the first man said, "so we'll explain it simple. That wheel wasn't punishment, it was a warning." Elias tightened his grip on the rifle, not to threaten, but to ground himself. "Then consider this your answer." For a moment no one moved. Horses shifted weight, leather creaked. Somewhere a bird took flight. Then the men laughed. "You think a piece of paper makes this land yours?" the leader asked. "Out here, land belongs to whoever keeps it quiet." Yana stepped forward despite Elias' silent warning glance. "You don't own fear anymore," she said. Her voice was steady, though the effort showed. "People will see." The riders' laughter stopped. "Careful," one of them said. "You already survived once." Elias took one step forward. "You leave now," he said, "and you don't come back." The men looked at each other. not anger, calculation. This isn't over, the leader said finally. You made yourself visible, rancher. That's never wise. They turned their horses and rode off slowly, deliberately, letting dust rise behind them like a promise. Elias waited until they were gone before lowering the rifle. Yana exhaled shakily. They'll return. I know, Elias said. He looked across the land, the fence, the posts, the open stretch of plains that offered nowhere to hide. He understood something now with absolute clarity. Helping her hadn't been the danger. Being seen was. That morning, Elias buried the remaining ropes near the old wheel and burned what he could. Smoke rose thin and dark, marking the place. He didn't know who might be watching, but he wanted them to see one thing clearly. Fear would not be left standing here. As the sun finally climbed into the sky, Elias felt the weight of what lay ahead settle fully onto his shoulders. The land was no longer quiet. And neither was his conscience. The next 2 days passed without riders, but the silence felt wrong. Elias worked the land as if nothing had changed, repairing fence posts, checking the well, feeding the horse, but every task carried an edge of awareness. He knew men like those riders didn't leave out of fear. They left to decide how to return. Inside the cabin, Yana grew stronger. She moved carefully, testing her balance, pushing through pain without complaint. Elias noticed she watched the land the same way he did, reading distance, listening to wind, measuring time. They won't come straight back, she said one evening. They'll wait until you think you're alone. Elias nodded. Then we won't be. That night he rode to the nearest homestead under cover of darkness. He didn't make accusations. He didn't raise his voice. He told the truth. About the wheel, about the men, about what happens when fear is allowed to settle in silence. Some doors stayed closed. Others did not. By dawn, Elias returned with something more valuable than weapons, witnesses. The riders came just after midday. This time they didn't circle the fence. They rode straight in, confident, rifles visible but not raised. The leader smiled as if greeting an old friend. Thought you'd come to your senses, he said. Elias stepped forward, but he wasn't alone now. 2 neighboring ranchers stood behind him. Another approached from the side, quiet men, hard men, men who had once looked away. Yana stood beside Elias, upright, unbroken. This land isn't quiet anymore, Elias said evenly. You don't own it, you don't own her, and you don't get to decide who stays silent. The leader's smile faded. You think numbers change anything? He asked. They change everything, one of the ranchers replied. For a long moment, no one moved. The wind passed through the grass, carrying dust and tension in equal measure. Fingers hovered near triggers, but no one reached. Finally, the leader exhaled sharply. He looked around and realized something too late. Fear had shifted sides. This isn't finished, he said, backing his horse away. Law or no law, we remember. So do we, Elias answered. The riders turned and left, not slow this time, not proud, just gone. That evening, a sheriff arrived. Someone had ridden fast, faster than fear. Elias told the story again, clearly, calmly. Yana spoke too. She named faces, described places. The sheriff listened without interruption. I won't promise miracles, the sheriff said finally, but I can promise this won't be ignored. When the law rode away, the land felt lighter, not safe, but changed. Later that night, Elias and Ayana sat outside the cabin, watching the stars come alive above the plains. The world stretched wide and quiet again, but this time it wasn't empty. You didn't have to do all this, Ayana said softly. Elias looked out across the dark land. I did, he replied, because if I hadn't, this place would have owned me instead of the other way around. Yana nodded. She understood. Some stands don't end a fight. They begin a different future. The days after the riders left felt strangely calm, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Elias knew better than to mistake quiet for peace. Trouble in the West rarely ended cleanly. It lingered, it waited, and sometimes it returned wearing a different face. Yana spent her mornings outside now, sitting on a crate near the cabin, letting the sun warm her skin. The wounds were healing, but scars remained, some visible, others not. Elias watched her from a distance, not out of suspicion, but respect. She had survived something meant to erase her. One evening, as Elias finished mending a fence, Ayana approached him slowly. "I'll be leaving soon," she said. Elias didn't answer right away. He kept his hands busy, tying the final knot. "You don't have to," he said at last. "I do," she replied gently. "Staying would keep danger close to you. They may not come back here, but they won't forget me." Elias straightened and looked at her. "You didn't ask for any of this." "No," she said, "but surviving means choosing what comes next." They prepared quietly over the next 2 days. Elias traded at a nearby post for supplies, food, water, a fresh blanket, and a sturdy horse. He told no one where she was going. Some things were safer left unspoken. On the morning she left, the sky was clear and wide, the kind of sky that made promises without keeping them. Elias helped her mount the horse. She winced slightly, but stayed upright. "You gave me more than shelter," Ayana said. "You gave me time." Elias shook his head. "You gave yourself that." She reached into a small leather pouch and placed a carved token into his hand, simple, worn smooth by years of use. "So you remember," she said, "not what was done, but what you chose." He closed his fingers around it. Yana turned the horse and rode west, her figure growing smaller against the open land. Elias stood there long after she disappeared, the silence settling back into place. But it was different now. Weeks passed. The sheriff returned once more with news. One of the riders had been arrested. Another had fled. Testimonies were spreading. Fear was losing its grip, not all at once, but enough. "You started something," the sheriff said. "I just didn't stop it," Elias replied. Life continued. Elias worked the farm. Travelers stopped more often now, some for water, some for work, some simply because the land no longer felt avoided. Word spread quietly, the way honest stories do. At night, Elias sometimes stood where the wheel had once been. Grass was already growing back. The land did not hold on to cruelty unless people forced it to. Walking away had cost Ayana safety. Staying had cost Elias certainty. But both had gained something rarer. A future shaped not by fear, but by choice. Seasons changed the way they always had, quietly, without asking permission. Autumn arrived with cooler winds and long shadows stretching across the fields. Elias worked the land alone now, his movements slower, more deliberate. The farm was no longer just a purchase. It was a responsibility, shaped by what had happened there. The old wheel was gone. Elias had dismantled it piece by piece, burned the wood, and buried the ashes far from the house. In its place, grass grew thick and unbroken. Anyone passing by would never know what once stood there, but the land knew. And so did Elias. From time to time, travelers stopped by. Some were just passing through. Others stayed longer, drawn by the quiet reputation of a place where no one was turned away without cause. Elias didn't ask where they came from or what they carried with them. He believed the West had taken enough from people already. One afternoon, a messenger from the sheriff arrived with final news. The men who had terrorized the area were gone. One imprisoned, one disappeared into the southern territories. Their hold was broken, not by force alone, but by exposure. Fear, once named, did not survive well. Elias listened, nodded, and returned to his work. He had not acted for recognition. He had acted because there was a moment when looking away would have been easier, and he hadn't. At night, Elias often sat outside, watching the stars come alive over the plains. He kept the small carved token Ayana had given him close, worn smooth now from his thumb passing over it. He never learned where she finally settled, but sometimes he imagined her riding beneath a sky just as wide, free of ropes, free of silence. Years passed. Elias grew older, his hair grayed, his hands stiffened, but his eyes stayed sharp. When new settlers arrived, uncertain and wary, he helped where he could. When cruelty appeared, he did not ignore it. He had learned the cost of silence and the value of standing firm. The land changed too. Fences were mended, fields grew, children's laughter occasionally carried across the wind from distant homesteads. The plains, once marked by fear, learned something else. Mercy. On one clear morning, Elias rode the boundary of his land for the last time. He stopped where the wheel had once stood and dismounted. The grass bent beneath his boots. No marker remained, no sign, just earth and sky. He removed his hat and stood there quietly. The West was never gentle, it never promised fairness, but sometimes it remembered those who chose to be. Elias mounted his horse and turned back toward the farmhouse, the sun rising behind him. The land did not forget what happened there, but it chose, at last, to let it rest.